Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Flowline here with Matt Offenbacher, as always. And we're kind of midway through a rainy week here in Houston, Texas, but the show must go on. And Matt, you know, I was going to ask you about the Astros, but
why?
I'm happy.
Why?
I'm happy to tell you that I was at an Astros game this weekend.
Yes.
And myself and my two kids stayed for the entirety of the 12 innings.
So you got to go to the game that, I mean, it was horrible baseball, but at least they won.
I thought it was pretty decent baseball. I guess it depends how you define horrible.
Yeah.
I would say entertaining to a degree. I mean, seeing Altuve hit that home run after not swinging at the third pitch and just duffing a few before he hit the home run. That was fun because my son knows the main players, right?
Yeah.
I think we've gone through this already because he plays PlayStation, the MLB show. And so, when Altuve comes up and a lot of folks that he remembers playing, then he gets fired up, which he's absolutely still extremely upset that Alvarez is not playing.
Yes,
and so
soon, though, he looms.
So I had to explain that to him because he didn't quite understand. Because in his sort of athletic journey, I've always told him to just tough it out, right? And so he's on the way to the game. He asked about Yordan Alvarez, and of course, I'm like, he's still hurt. He's like, why doesn't he just tough it out, Dad? I'm like, well, it's a bit bigger than that. And so I was explaining the fractured hand, I think is what it was, or something going on there.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't believe that someone at that caliber wasn't able to just tough it out. He's like, well, that's what you tell me. And I'm like, yeah, but... And so I had to kind of go through that and explain it to him. But nonetheless, it was an exciting game. But that's really the only game that I paid attention to over the last couple months. So anyway, what's the dealio?
I'm at a very low point so the Astros lost 10-0 yesterday. I think they've been outscored like 43-1 since that game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've been awful.
Gosh.
And it just nothing looks good. The pitching's been awful. And it's one of those, okay, we have a bunch of people coming back from injuries where it was like we knew they were coming, but even the other day, like Christian Javier, who I was, threw pretty well his first start. I was listening on the radio, and it was like third inning, and they're like, yeah, somebody's up in the bullpen, and I'm like, oh no, he's hurt again? I was like, what is this? It was like, no, he's sick. And it was like, okay, so the guy comes back, and now he's catching a cold and can't pitch. It was just so I'm really hoping that this is the worst of the worst, but it is difficult to watch right now. Okay. So yeah, thanks for bringing it up, but that's the update.
Right. Okay. Well, obviously Matt's not fired up about the Astros and their current situation, but I feel like going into October, it's I think we're hitting the trough and the bottom. We're bouncing.
That's what I need. That's what I want to believe.
And then we're gonna just
explode off the blocks.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
That's it. So hopefully within the next couple months, you'll hear a lighter tone in Matt's voice and more of an excited tone for that matter. But one thing that doesn't excite me, Matt, is when you're drilling with water-based muds and you have to deal with contaminants. It's very common. I think a lot of times with water-based mud, you're either maintaining or you're likely treating some form of a contaminant or trying to avoid a contaminant from messing with your day. But I brought this up because we do drill with water-based muds here down in the lower 48 quite a bit, and it can often happen where you've got different contaminants, and you kind of go through this in mud school, but that would be a good idea, just kind of run through the different contaminants that can occur while drilling with water-based mud, and then how to treat it. Just kind of a refresher, if you will.
Yeah, I thought it was a good kind of nuts and bolts topic. I think we'll break it up into a double header.
Yeah.
And today, I think we'll start with acid gases.
Okay.
And I think it's just because, there's all the usual suspects, but acid gases can, they sort of break it's a good point of departure, I guess. And
Okay.
so I thought we could start there and kind of break some of that down without going too in depth. And granted, we have other episodes that cover this stuff. So
Yeah.
if you want to learn more, go there. There's some other good reference literature out there, but we just thought we'd cover some of the basics.
Yeah, and I think keeping it kind of like rig level, like, operations, like if this has, you're seeing this, here's what you should notice, and then here's typically how you would treat it, without getting too in the weeds, kind of like you alluded to. So anyway, let's start with that. And acid gases, Matt, let's first describe what is an acid gas.
Well, so the two most common gases that you would encounter while you're drilling, and the sources can be downhole. They can be, sometimes you can have some of these issues at surface. It could be thermal degradation of products sometimes, but the two that we focus on with drilling fluids is CO2, which could come in forms of carbonate or bicarbonate, and then H2S, and so pretty serious, and they're in their native pH, very acidic, corrosive. There's ways they affect fluid properties, and with H2S, there's also serious, safety considerations. So, yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the first one being H2S. What sort of some symptoms one should look for while drilling with water-based mud, and you may be encountering H2S?
So H2S, they always say like, oh, the rotten egg smell. Well, of course, I think most people know that if you have a rotten egg smell, that means you actually don't have that much if you can smell it. If you get a big slug of it, it will kill all the nerves, or you won't be able to smell anything, and you will probably pass out quickly and need to be removed from the area.
Yeah.
But a lot of rigs now too, you go through all the literature, and a lot of this stuff was written a long time ago. A lot of times, our first indicator is an alarm goes off.
Yeah.
So there's electronic detectors. A lot of us in a lot of areas, you're wearing them, and so, your first tell will be something tells you. Hopefully, you may see a darkening of the fluid. Probably the pH, because this is an acid gas. That H plus, we've talked about alkalinities. That's the proton. Lowers the pH. You may see some, viscosity and some increased fluid loss. But you're going to be headed towards that acidic range, and visually you may see some like black scale forming on the pipe, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, you got to have a lot of it, and I don't think we really let it get that far if we're there's enough eyes on this and enough detection methods that it doesn't require that kind of heavy lifting to get there.
Yeah. You're not going to be drilling for days with H2S at a certain level that's going to have this occur. And so to your point, like technology's advanced from back in the day to where the alarms typically can sense a small amount, right? And then you can start treating it before it's like, everyone mask up, and you're on the floor tripping pipe with masks on. That typically doesn't happen anymore.
No, and even I would say like a lot of places, they still require an H2S plan. You go on the rig, you see that windsock, and they say, look, go upwind of this stuff if you set off the alarms. But for the most part, when we talk about treating the fluid, if it's high enough, they just get it already off the rig and they bring in another crew to take care of everything. Because in high H2S areas I've worked, normally you have to get fit tested for a mask. You might have to, shave that lovely beard that you have.
Yes, you do.
There may be other requirements and different levels of what you're allowed to do and how long you're allowed to work and all that kind of stuff. So there's a much bigger picture. H2S is actually, it's heavier than air, so it tends to be lower around, and it's also flammable. And so there are stories of way back when you encounter a bunch of this, you get away from the rig, and sort of the last resort is to shoot a flare at it and burn the rig down so that the gas can't affect, if you're near a population center or something, the gas can't drift over and hurt anyone. But we don't hear a lot about that these days. What we do have is we might have some sensors go off, and then we go ahead and proceed to treat and avoid having those dangerous levels of H2S.
Yeah, and that's a good thing is we do have means of treating this stuff. So why don't we go ahead and talk through the treatment side of it?
Yes. So recently on an episode, we had talked about H2S and basically how raising pH, when we talked, I think we were talking about alkalinities in general, But you start raising your pH, and you're taking away hydrogens, So you go from acidic to basic, and you get those OHs, and you go from H2S, and you lose ions, it goes HS, so I lost one of them. And then eventually you get all the way over to the right, and you end up with HS minus, or you end up with S minus, sorry. So, but at that pH, we get all the way over to the right, and that the amount of available H2S is typically, if you look at those curves, and those curves are ideal conditions, that sort of thing, you're at about a pH of a 10.5. So most best practices are going to say raise the pH to 11, maybe 11.5, understanding that pH is a logarithmic scale, which means you're, an order of magnitude, between 10 and 11 is an order of magnitude of those OH and species. And so getting that pH up is one of your first sort of best practices because the H2S is unavailable. That doesn't mean this isn't a reversible thing, though. So then we want to go ahead and we want to treat. And in fact, just we'll just keep the pH high. Well, you might not pick up on the H2S, and then the pH drops. You've got a bunch of possible H2S that you were sort of dancing with. What you want to do is scavenge it.
Right.
You want to put it in some sort of irreversible state. So, a very common one is zinc oxide. You can use zinc carbonate. These have different reaction times and that sort of thing. If you're expecting it, you can actually pre-treat with some of this stuff. And I think the other part of it is, where is this coming from, right? So if it's coming from the formation, like maybe you want to wait up. Maybe we don't want to take constant influxes of gas.
Right.
But the other thing is, sometimes I've seen H2S detectors, I don't know if you've seen this, where it comes from like water-based mud breaking down, like bugs getting to it. Or you go to re-enter a well and the bugs have made H2S, anaerobic bacteria has made H2S.
Yeah. I've heard of that. I've not been on a rig with that happening, but it's very possible.
Yeah, so you want to kill them bugs.
Yep.
And so, those are things where, it's almost kind of like, it's like treating foaming. We've talked about that, where it's like, okay, you can add defoamer, but like, why do you have foam? What's your mud chemistry? What did you put in it? Is the hopper open? Like, treat it, but figure out the symptoms.
Right.
And H2S is very much, okay, let's treat it. Let's minimize the risk, but let's also make sure that we've addressed the root cause. And I guess the only other thing with scavengers, so triazine is a liquid scavenger we use a lot out in the Permian. Zinc oxide is, for large amounts, but it's, a solid material. And, zinc has some limitations in certain areas where you might not want to use zinc. And too much zinc can affect mud properties and that sort of thing. So you got to keep an eye. You can't go crazy with some of this stuff.
Right.
Although the one thing I think we all have to be honest with ourselves with taking H2S seriously, everybody's going to sandbag, right? Like, if it says I can scavenge 1,100 parts per million or whatever it is with like a pound per barrel, you're going to be like, okay, well then let's do 2 pounds.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm picking up. And so the problem is, if everybody sandbags on top of sandbags, that's where you may risk overdoing it.
Yep.
So proceed with caution.
Yep.
But also understand that you don't want to be too cautious when it comes to something like this.
Gotcha.
I can deal with screwed up mud properties. I can't deal with H2S.
Right.
So
let's talk about the other acid gas, which is the CO2.
Yeah, CO2. So this is the one that, like, when I was trying to outline this episode, really got me, because there is so many what ifs and so many like nuances to it.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that we've got CO2, and if we're moving down our ionic species, we start with carbonic acid, right? And then we move to bicarbonate, and then we move to carbonate. But you bring in the CO2, and if you don't know whether you're in that bicarbonate or carbonate region, you might actually make it worse by picking the wrong treatment or not treating correctly. And not only that, but a bunch of this stuff can you can make things worse if you're on the wrong track.
Yeah.
But what you will probably see is elevated gels, and we have another episode where we talk about the relationship of alkalinities. So I'm not going to get into that necessarily here, but you can draw the distinction between the how much carbonate, how much bicarbonate from your ionic species you have, just based off of your PM, your PF, your MF, and your relationship with your pH. And in essence, what you're trying to do is determine the buffering capacity. So if you're bringing in CO2, like you can use a scavenger as an option. They're just not cheap, right?
Okay.
And so the nice thing about that is I'm tying up the CO2. I don't have to, deal with this stuff as much. But the other thing on the treatment side, especially if we have bicarbonate, the big question I want to ask is, what are you doing with your soda ash? Because we have most of the bicarbonate issues we see, and we see a ton of CO2 in a lot of areas we work, but we see a lot of self-induced bicarbonate issues by just adding soda ash because I don't want to add caustic, right? It's easier. I don't have to use the barrel. Don't have to added PPE.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to mess with our pH, and what we end up doing is creating a bicarbonate problem that didn't come from downhole. It came from adding too much at surface.
Right.
So, if you start seeing some of these wonky things, or like your lubricant that doesn't normally cheese starts having some issues, those kinds of things, circle back to this.
Okay.
But the very broad, obtuse other options for treatment depends on where you are in your pH. Because what we want to do is we want to precipitate calcium carbonate to get rid of this species of carbonate or bicarbonate. So, like, if my pH is below about 10.3, I can add lime, which is CaOH2.
Yeah.
So I'm giving it calcium to make that calcium carbonate, and I'm giving it those OHs to raise the pH. If I want to stay between 10.3 and 11.3, like I want to keep my pH constant, where I'm at here is I use lime for calcium, but I can also use gyp. So lime's going to raise the pH, and gyp is going to lower it. So if we keep those guys we can run that lane between 10.3 and 11.3 doing that. And then I can form my calcium carbonate. If I've got, a pH of, 11.3 or higher, then I don't want to raise my pH anymore. And I can add gyp. And, calcium's already not very soluble, but I can lower my pH. I can precipitate calcium sulfate, and hopefully, or not, I can precipitate calcium carbonate with lower pH and hopefully get out of trouble there.
Gotcha.
But all of that is a very general... It gets even worse, guys. I mean, you have to think your way through what else is happening with your mud properties.
Yeah.
Are you using a polymeric system? Are you using a dispersed system? Those things are all going to come into play as to how your mud responds and how you want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So that's just for illustrative purposes only, because we don't have, and I don't think, honestly, in an audio-based format, or even the video, for those of us joining along on YouTube, hello, I think that it would be very difficult to get into all of the ins and outs of this.
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
No, I just was going to reiterate that. Like, when you're drilling with a well, especially with water-based mud, there's so many different things, and there's so many different formations, and there's a lot of factors, right, that you need to consider when making a treatment plan. If you have, especially with CO2, bicarbonate, carbonate contamination, because when it comes to alkalinities, a lot of folks think they have a good grasp of it, but it can get kind of murky, and there's a lot of different, like, folks have strong opinions on how to approach certain things versus other people. And so I would just, if you have a water-based mud program and you're in an area that you're susceptible to some of this stuff, really talk it through with either the account manager or the engineering manager, and have a good plan in place. And maybe you have to brush off the old mud school manual to get sort of yourself more familiar with how to break down what's actually happening downhole, and then with what's happening with your mud. Because if you only look at pH, then you might treat it not realizing that the rest of your alkalinities are getting jacked up. And so, but I think the point of the episode is just to bring up the idea that it is complex. You need to do your homework. I wouldn't, if you get in a bind, not listen to this episode and then treat accordingly, because there's a lot of different ways you can treat things clearly. But this hopefully spurs some more deep dive for the folks listening. If you are a mud engineer and you're looking at maybe switching from oil based to water based, maybe just brush up on your alkalinities and your contamination treatment stuff.
Yeah, and I think you're right on there where I'd say lean into your experience, because you're probably running 1 or 2 mud systems and you're encountering CO2, and there's a pretty clear method on how to deal with it.
Yeah.
We've seen a few where it's like, drilling with cut brine or something, where people are like, oh, it's brine, who cares? And then like they try and use a lubricant and have a bunch of problems, or produced water for that matter. You push things out of solution with your pH and blah, 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 you create a mess. So there's but there's an element of experience, and then the other part of it is if you don't have the experience, what you can do is you can pilot test this stuff. And so that may be I'm in a pinch on the rig. I know what my alkalinities are. I have an idea of how to treat this, but is it going to make things worse or better? A lot of this stuff, the worst part of it is if you get this wrong, it gets really thick. But if you can do that in a jar of mud in your lab and see it get thick versus a 2,000 barrel circulating system, you could spare yourself some headaches. Because you'll knock this stuff out and then you may still have to regain some properties. You may need to throw in some pack. You may need to do some other things to address fluid loss or, get a thinner in there. Anyways, there's a lot of baggage with carbonates and bicarbonates, but I think a lot of it is not as overwhelming when you get to the area you're operating in with the mud system you're going to use.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. And with that said, folks, tune in to the next episode where we'll run through a few other contaminants for round 2. With that being said, please connect with us. If you have any questions on the show from today, reach out to us on LinkedIn, or you can hit us up at the Flowline podcast at aesfoods.com. Make sure to connect with the AES Foods page on LinkedIn and check out the YouTube channel. We got a bunch of great stuff out there as well. All right, round 2 coming up. Till then, bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of The Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.